Okay, let's be real for a second. We've pretty much all been there, right? Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're dissecting something called health anxiety, what most of us know as hypochondria. We're going to trace its bizarre roots from ancient medical texts right up to modern clinical psychology and unpack exactly what happens in our brains when a totally normal concern suddenly turns into all-consuming fear.
You know the exact feeling. You get a totally minor headache, you decide to quickly look it up online, and bam, sudden, icy panic. A totally harmless search instantly spirals into this absolute conviction that you've contracted some rare, deadly disease. It is a terrifying rabbit hole to fall down. But why on earth does our brain do this to us?
So, part 1. What exactly is hypochondriasis? Let's define what we're actually dealing with here.
Now, the absolute most important thing to grasp is that this isn't just someone making things up for attention. Not at all. Hypochondriasis is an intense, persistent fear of having a serious illness, and it's driven entirely by catastrophically misinterpreting totally normal bodily signs. The crushing distress of frantically checking your pulse over and over, that is very real, driven by this hypervigilant awareness of the physical body.
And get this, humanity has literally been battling this for over 2,000 years. The term itself actually comes from the ancient Greek word hypochondrios, which means the area right under your ribs. Believe it or not, ancient doctors honestly thought that mysterious, melancholic vapors were rising up from your ribcage to cause all this psychological distress. Wild, right?
All right, moving on to part 2, medical classification changes.
Nowadays, thankfully, we aren't blaming rib vapors anymore. The American Psychiatric Association actually completely revamped their approach in 2013. The old DSM-IV diagnosis of hypochondriasis unfortunately carried a lot of unfair stigma. So in the DSM-V, they dismantled it entirely. They split it into 2 much more precise categories. Somatic symptom disorder, for folks who have actual physical symptoms they're excessively worried about, and illness anxiety disorder, for those whose symptoms are basically absent but their mental alarm bells are just running on overdrive.
Now, the World Health Organization, they took a completely different angle in their ICD-11. They looked at the constant pulse checking and the endless reassurance seeking from doctors and realized, hey, this actually looks exactly like obsessive-compulsive behavior. It's like being trapped on an exhausting medical hamster wheel. So they moved the diagnosis right into the obsessive-compulsive and related disorders section.
Which brings us perfectly to part 3, the cycle of excessive anxiety.
This is where it gets really fascinating. Clinical researchers Salkofis and Warwick laid out this cycle, and it maps out the trap flawlessly. Imagine a totally harmless muscle twitch. Instantly, your brain jumps to the absolute worst-case scenario. That terrifying thought causes genuine physical anxiety. Your heart rate spikes, you get dizzy, and then tragically, your brain interprets those new anxiety symptoms as undeniable proof that you really are sick. It just feeds right back into itself.
So, what's actually keeping this vicious cycle spinning? It boils down to 4 dysfunctional beliefs that just bury you under a mountain of worry. 1, you massively overestimate the chances that a random sensation means a disease. 2, you imagine the absolute awfulness of that disease as a total catastrophe. 3, you become convinced you just wouldn't be able to cope with it. And 4, you think doctors are inadequate and will just miss the diagnosis anyway.
And honestly, to make matters even harder, many people dealing with this have a trait known as somatosensory amplification. Think of it like a giant volume dial in your brain that controls how you feel normal bodily noises. For someone with this trait, that dial is cranked all the way up to 11. A normal heartbeat isn't just felt, it's a loud, disturbing alarm bell demanding your attention right now.
When we look at the actual data, this super amplified perception is heavily linked to things like panic disorder and general anxiety disorder. These folks aren't making up the symptom. They are literally just experiencing it at an incredibly amplified volume. And that acts as pure fuel for that catastrophic misinterpretation cycle we were just talking about.
Let's dive into part 4, the internet trap, or as you might know it, Cyberchondria.
We absolutely have to talk about how the digital age supercharged this ancient problem. A staggering 83% of 14 to 17-year-olds are already searching for health info online. 83%! That shows just how incredibly early this habit of digital reassurance seeking starts in the modern world.
You know, the internet seems like it should be the ultimate tool to calm your nerves. But for someone with health anxiety, it's actually a digital spiderweb. Cyberchondria acts as an anxiety escalator.
The more you search, the more terrifying, ultra-rare diseases you stumble across. It's deeply tied to this fundamental intolerance of uncertainty. But the cold truth is, you can never, ever find a 100% guarantee of health on the internet.
And this brings us to a seriously tragic irony. A massive study out of the Karolinska Institute found that chronic, unrelenting worry actually physically damages your body's stress response system over time. We're talking about real immune dysfunction, chronic inflammation, and a significantly higher risk of all-cause mortality. The physical toll of the pure anxiety itself is often way worse than the imaginary diseases people are actually worrying about.
All right, part 5, how to overcome it. Let's talk about some real solutions.
The incredibly good news here is that clinical science has developed highly effective ways to break the spell. Cognitive restructuring helps you pinpoint and literally swap out those automatic doomsday thoughts. Then there's exposure and response prevention, which basically means confronting a trigger, like reading about an illness, but specifically not engaging in your usual safety habits, like aggressively checking your pulse or Googling symptoms. And finally, behavioral experiments let you collaboratively test your beliefs with a therapist, literally proving to yourself that just paying close attention to a body part makes the sensation feel stronger.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one thought. We all get weird aches, twitches, and sensations. But the next time your heart skips a totally random beat, who's really writing the story in your head? Will you listen to the normal, everyday hum of your body, or are you going to let your anxiety grab the mic? Awareness is absolutely the first step to taking that microphone back.